It was a dark and gloomy night when four friends decided to go on a journey through the tangled roads of the deep forest. They got into their old but reliable car and set off. The first few hours passed without incident, but as they went deeper into the forest, the atmosphere became more and more ominous. Soon they noticed that the road became more and more winding and covered with thick fog. The wind whistled around the car, creating an eerie sound that penetrated to the very depths of their souls. They began to feel that something was wrong, but decided to continue their journey. After several kilometers, they noticed a strange silhouette on the side of the road. When they stopped, they saw a woman in a white dress standing in the middle of the darkness. She slowly raised her hand, indicating for them to stop, but something in her gaze was unnatural, causing them to shiver down their backs. They decided to ignore the woman and continue on their way, but the car suddenly stalled. All four friends began to panic, trying to start the engine, but to no avail. At this time, the woman began to approach the car. She went to the driver's window and whispered, "Don't leave me here alone." Her voice sounded cold and shrill. Her friends looked at her in fright, trying to figure out what was going on. Suddenly, several more figures emerged from the darkness, as gloomy and sinister as the woman. They surrounded the car and started banging on the windows and doors. The friends realized that they were trapped and that these creatures were not ordinary people. They tried to get out of the car and run away, but all exits were blocked. The creature standing at the driver's door began to stretch out its long curved fingers to the handle. All four friends felt fear seizing their bodies. Their hearts were beating so hard that it seemed that they were ready to jump out of their chest. At the last moment, when the creature touched the door handle, the car suddenly roared and stalled again. This gave the friends one last opportunity to escape. They ran out of the car and ran through the woods without looking back. Since then, they have avoided trips to the forest and tried not to remember what happened. However, the nightmares and memories of that night did not leave them. They have become increasingly suspicious and paranoid, always expecting sinister creatures to reappear in their lives. Friends began to look for answers to their questions about what had happened. They spent many hours studying legends and stories about the forest in which they found themselves that night. Their search led them to horrifying revelations. It turned out that the forest they were traveling in was cursed. The creatures that tried to get them were the spirits of the dead people who died in this forest. They were doomed to wander its tangled roads and attract the living to share their terrible fate. The friends realized that they had narrowly escaped death that night. They realized that they had to warn others about the danger of this forest. They decided to create a website and share their story to warn people against traveling to this cursed place. Their story aroused great interest and a wave of horror among people who themselves encountered unexplained phenomena in this forest. Many of them shared their stories on the Friends website, forming a community of people who wanted to expose the secrets of this gloomy place. Friends have become active fighters for safety and warning people against visiting this forest. They conducted excursions and lectures, telling about their experiences and warning about possible dangers. Their work has helped save many lives. People who learned about the cursed forest from friends avoided it and told their loved ones about its danger. Thus, the number of victims of disappearances in this forest began to decrease. Friends understood that their lives would never be the same after what they had been through, but they were proud that they were able to find the strength and courage to warn others about the night that changed their lives. And although fear and nightmares will always accompany them, they decided not to let it determine their future. They have become symbols of hope and strength for all those who have faced the inexplicable and terrible. So their story ended, but the legend of the cursed forest continued to live in the hearts of people. And everyone who hears this story will remember that there are places in the world that are better left alone and not explored. One cold autumn night, a group of friends decided to go on a terrible journey by car. They had heard many scary stories about an abandoned village located deep in the forest and decided to check how true they were. The path to the village was winding and dark, and the old car they were using didn't inspire much confidence. but the friends were determined and curious, and nothing could stop them. As they approached the village, they noticed that the surrounding environment was becoming more and more ominous. The trees looked like huge ghosts, stretching their branches in all directions, and a gloomy fog covered the entire area. Arriving at the village, they found that all the buildings had been abandoned and destroyed. Most of the houses were either burned down or overgrown with thick cobwebs. But one house looked different from the others. He stood on a hill and seemed like a clumsy testament to the past. Friends decided to go into the house to learn more about its history. Once inside, they felt a chill that penetrated to the very bones. The air was saturated with the smell of rot and decay. As they explored the rooms, they began to hear strange noises. Rustles, creaks, and footsteps were heard from the depths of the house. The heart of each of them began to beat faster, and fear gripped their bodies. Suddenly, one of the friends disappeared. They panicked and started looking for him all over the house, but he was missing. This made the others even more scared and doubtful about their decision to visit this village. They decided to leave the house and return to the car, but when they went outside, they found that the car had disappeared. They were trapped in this creepy village, with no way to escape. Fear and panic seized the friends when they heard ominous laughter coming from afar. They realized that they were not alone in this place, and that someone or something was following them. They rushed to run in search of salvation, but all in vain. Sinister forces caught up with them and began hunting. One by one, the friends disappeared into the darkness, becoming victims of the sinister curse of this village. In the end, only one of the friends managed to escape. He ran as fast as he could until he got out of the woods and reached the nearest road. He stopped a passing car and asked for help. He told his terrible story to the police, but when they returned to the village, they found that all the buildings had disappeared. The village has become a cursed area that should never be explored. Since then, this surviving friend has been warning everyone about the creepy village and warning people about the consequences that could happen if they decide to go on a trip to this cursed place. Those who have heard this story have always been careful and were not going to check its veracity. They believe that some places could really be cursed and dangerous for people. But there were also those who did not believe in these stories. They believed that all this was just fiction and an attempt to intimidate people. They were curious to find out what was really going on in that abandoned village. One day, a group of young and brave researchers decided to test this legend. They were sure that they would be able to expose all these horror stories and prove that there was nothing dangerous in the village. They prepared for the trip, gathered all the necessary equipment, and set off. Along the way, they discussed their plans and were determined to prove that all these stories are just fiction. When they arrived at the village, they saw the same thing that was told in the legend. The buildings were destroyed. The atmosphere was ominous and filled with mystery. The group began to explore the houses. They took photos and shot videos to have proof of their courage. They didn't feel any of the cold or the smell of decay that the legend spoke of. But as they penetrated deeper into the village, they began to hear strange noises. Rustles, creaks, and footsteps were heard from the darkness. Their hearts beat faster, but they didn't give up. Suddenly, one of the researchers disappeared. They panicked and started looking for him, but he was missing. It scared the others, but they weren't going to back down. They continued their research, hoping to find an explanation for these strange phenomena. But as they moved on, more and more of them disappeared. The remaining researchers realized that they had to leave here, but when they tried to return to their car, they found that it had disappeared. They were trapped in this creepy village. Fear and panic seized them when they heard the sinister laughter coming from afar. They realized that they were not alone here and that something or someone was following them. They rushed to run, but the sinister forces caught up with them and began hunting. One by one, the explorers disappeared into the darkness, becoming victims of the curse of this village. In the end, only one managed to escape. He got out of the forest and reached the nearest road, where he found help. He told his terrible story to the police, But when they returned to the village, they found that all the buildings had disappeared. The village has become a cursed place that should never be explored. The one who survived began to warn others about the creepy village and warn of the consequences that could happen if they decide to go there. The story of this journey has become another warning for everyone to leave some places alone and not to play with forces that we cannot understand.